All right. So I'm going to talk about not necessarily what I do during my day job, because the regular job I just kind of write software, and that's not quite as pretty. But what I love to do is take a lot of the imagery that's coming down from space and bringing it to life. Because only a small segment of what comes down is actually processed by the scientists and given out to the public. Though all of it comes down as the basic raw imagery, the raw data, so anyone can grab it. We as taxpayers pay for it, so we should have access for it. But as far as bringing it to life, that's in a lot of cases up to us. So I specialize mostly in the, as far as the outer solar system, in 4 different spacecraft that you see here, and they're spanning a wide range of years and a wide range of technology. Still flying is Voyager. Voyager 1 and 2, those are our first interstellar probes that are at least Voyager 2 has left the solar system and is out in the heliopause. We have Galileo, which was orbiting Jupiter between 1995 and 2003. We have Cassini, which was made a flyby of Jupiter and orbited Saturn for about 13 years, from 2004 until last September, when it was deorbited. And Juno, which is currently up over Jupiter. Now, Juno is interesting because actually, initially it was not designed to carry a camera. It was going to study the internals of Jupiter, which are kind of hard to get at with a camera. But the team decided to include at least a limited camera, and what they put on there was a glorified dashboard cam. It wasn't that involved, but it actually came out to be a lot more than even what the mission planners had expected. So, the planets that we're focusing on, I'm sure you're all familiar with them. These are images that I've processed. We've got Jupiter, and these aren't to scale. Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. These 3 are in true color, so that's as you'd see them if you were out there. Jupiter, that's using a near-infrared band, so it's a little off what you would see close. Now, one interesting thing to note here is Saturn is not the only planet with rings. All of these have rings. Mm-hmm. It's demonstrated here with this image of Uranus. Now, actually, if you were there, you would not see the ring with the planet that bright. That was taken with Voyager imagery, and I had to kind of bring out the rings bring out their luminance a lot more. If you actually were holding a piece of that ring dust, it would be very, very dark, like almost holding a piece of charcoal. Neptune as well has the rings. They're in there, very, 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 very thin, very faint, and same with Jupiter. So, how do these cameras work? They don't work like your digital cameras that you get down in at the mall or whatever. At least with Voyager, Galileo, and Cassini, they use a grayscale camera, which gives you higher pixel density, so you're not having to paint on different colors with it. And it allows you to have a wider range of spectral visibility. So what these cameras do is they've got the camera sensor. In the case of Voyager, it was a Vidicon television camera. Galileo and Cassini had digital cameras. And in front of them, they've got wheels. In the case of Voyager, Cassini, or Voyager and Galileo, it was only one wheel. Cassini had dual wheels, and on those were filters. Just like the filters you'd screw onto the front of your camera lens. And these range from within the infrared all the way up to the ultraviolet. So what you're doing here is you have a combination of 3 different filters, or filtered images of Enceladus, and you assemble them together and you can get a little bit of color. Now, Enceladus is tough because it's a giant snowball, so it's kind of difficult to bring out the colors. So in this case, these images include a view in the infrared, green, and ultraviolet. And using that kind of expanded spectrum, we're actually able to bring out a little additional color detail on some of these objects. So this kind of demonstrates a little bit more. We got the image in red, but the interesting part here is this is false color because there's actually an infrared image that has been mapped to red, green, and then blue, ultraviolet with that. And you can see, I'm sure anyone's aware of how you arrange these three colors together. They come out to white. It's kind of fun how that works. Now, Juno has a completely different style how they did the camera. They wanted to keep it cheap, so they used pretty much, like I said, a glorified dashboard cam. So they've got, instead of and they had to make it difficult for us too. They couldn't make it just a nice dashboard cam. They had to make it difficult. So what they did is they have it's kind of a rectangle, and on it are painted 3 or 4 strips of color-sensitive pixels. First one's blue, then green, red, and then there's like a methane band. And what they'll do is it only has a 58-degree field of view from side to side. So what they're doing up there is the spacecraft is always spinning and enables the magnetometer on it to work and study the internals of the planet. So what they're doing is, as it turns, they go and take a picture, and they'll splice them all together. And that's what you're seeing here. For each triplet, you've got red, blue, green, blue, red, green, blue, and they go and assemble it on. They can actually take images a full 360 degrees around if they wanted to. Now that makes it a challenge because you've got to reassemble those. So I wrote a script that goes and takes all these data, reassembles it based on the color channel and different aspects, and actually you can take into effect, and what I do is take into effect spacecraft movement, because as they're taking the pictures, Juno's in close, moving extremely fast. Pretty much, I believe it's about 100 miles a second. It's up. Jupiter's got a lot of gravity. So you have to account for the movement of the spacecraft. So it's moving quite a distance, even between each of these images. And it's almost, I think for this particular exposure, it was about 0.378 milliseconds per, or delay between frames. And Juno has maybe 2 or 3 rotations per minute for the spacecraft itself. So you assemble these, and at this point you're basically at the same place you were with Cassini. So you had to assemble these images first, then you're able to combine them together into the color image. So, what tools do we use to do this? I'm going to take you a little bit behind the scenes with this. The NASA PDS Atlas, that's where you're able to access all of this imagery that you bought and paid for as taxpayers. And there's thousands of images there. You wouldn't believe how much data. Now there's Syscal out there, which is actually software provided by the spacecraft operators. Sci2TIFF, which is some software that I wrote. The USGS ISIS 3 is for planetary data processing with a focus towards geographical projection and assembly. Cassini processing, which is my entire Cassini pipeline built into software. And I've got a link at the end if you want to steal it. And then there will be Photoshop and Lightroom, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. So, Juno, pretty similar. The Juno raw image database, that's where it's getting all down. I'm sure you've seen the links online where they go, oh, Juno new pictures from Jupiter. That's where they're coming from. The Juno pipeline is another bit of software I wrote, which goes assemble those individual framelets and runs a number of different filters for color equalization, calibration, and cleanup of a lot of dead pixels and some other artifacts. So I keep it simple, really. I try to keep it about as faithful to what you see as I can, provided we're in the red, green, and blue color space. So this is a Juno image. Once I get them in there, I'm just mapping them to color. There's a bit of alignment you have to do. Again, the spacecraft's moving at a good clip. A little bit of, I trim out the horizon, otherwise it looks a little jagged. And adjust some colors. Then you can bring it into Lightroom and provide some even further filtering and bring it down to pretty much what the spacecraft saw. Because basically you have to adjust the data to what the capabilities of the camera and any other light instances. Then I will also provide some dehazing, remove some of the atmosphere and get down to the blue color aspects of the planet. Because actually we didn't realize that the poles of Jupiter were quite as blue as they are. And there were some other neat discoveries they were able to make with the Juno Cam. In fact, if you're not really able to see it in this image here, but the south pole of Jupiter has this interesting, there's 5 of them. There's 5 storms that all, like almost 5 hurricanes that all kind of just wrap around the pole. It's real interesting. And they did not expect that going there. So actually quite happy they took they added the camera there. So, mosaicing. Now, this is a real tricky part with some of the spacecraft imagery, is because a lot of the cameras have a very narrow field of view. Now, Juno Cam's about 58 degrees wide. The other spacecraft, like Cassini, its wide-angle camera had a 3-degree field of view. Its narrow-angle imager had a 0.3-degree field of view. Pretty similar with Galileo and with Voyager. So if they want to get a big, wide image of Saturn, like the ones you've seen, they've got to take a whole bunch of pictures, depending on how far they are from the planet. And in this case, when they took this image, they were right behind the planet. So, and that can be a real tough one. That's a mosaic I actually haven't finished yet, for obvious purpose or reasons. So how is that pointing look? This is a particular observation of a particular image. This simulation out of the mission. So for each little green frame that's come up is the spacecraft taking a picture. So it's got to reorient itself, has to take the picture, spin the filter wheel, take another picture from the same angle. And during the time, the spacecraft is moving, and all the little moons are moving. And Saturn's got 62 of them. So, I'm going to keep track of all those guys. Let's do that again. Right. So there's a similar observation. This is the Cassini final farewell image that was taken on, the data was taken on September 13th, but this was the final, part of the final set of images that came down from the spacecraft. So it took these set of pictures as part of the mosaic. I've already gone and assembled them color-wise. So for each one of these frames, there's 3 images that are part of that. And I've run the calibration software, which removes geometric distortion, it removes dark space, it removes a number of other things, and just gets it down to what was actually out there. So, alignment. The key to that aspect of the calibration is that geometric, we're fixing the geometric distortion of the lens. Makes this a whole heck of a lot easier. Otherwise, I'm sure folks are familiar with how the outer space of a lens will distort an image. So it fixes that, makes the sunlights a lot easier. It was a big pain before I discovered doing calibration. And so this is it put together. I haven't done any blending, so you can see the live lines between them and whatnot. And then when you go and do blending, you get Saturn. I've applied a couple of different color adjustments on this. The one trick I've discovered with the Cassini cameras is it's sensitive enough to get ring shine in the back of the planet. So basically the light's coming over, hitting the rings, and illuminating the next side. And in fact, if you look up the Cassini final images, they show you they just released a new one, which I processed for the mission, that shows where Cassini actually impacted the planet. And that was right around here. That would rotate into the other side by the time Cassini got there. But that was illuminated by ring shine. Those rings are mostly ice, so they're pretty bright, really reflective. So, another fun aspect is true color. So, dealing with space imaging, you're not always seeing true color. So, it's a tricky thing. You got to deal with the spacecraft electronics. So, that's Titan in true color, and then you can play with true color. You can take a different band. So, with Titan, you can use this color band. It's near infrared, about 7.28 microns. It can penetrate the clouds. It's the only moon in the solar system that has a dense atmosphere. In fact, if you were standing on it, you could fly with one set of wings. You die, but so that's the surface and the thing. But so I gotta kind of hurry up here. There's more of starting to move into false color when you start taking in infrared or ultraviolet color filters. You're able to describe other details of the planet. These are all Saturn in ways that you've never seen before. I'm able to take those details, penetrate the methane and other aspects of the planet, and bring out a lot of cloud detail of different jet streams and multi-layer structure in the atmosphere. So, I'm going to set the TV. So. All right. So, I'll quickly run through a bunch of our moons. That's our moon. You may recognize it. Just give it there for comparison. We've got Io, moon of Jupiter. This is the most volcanic object in the solar system. It's also covered with silicate, or not silicon, sulfur dioxide, so it would smell. Over there. Europa, that's going to be the target of our next flagship mission, the Europa Clipper. It's basically got a massive subsurface ocean. Ganymede, kind of similar, but another moon of Jupiter. And Callisto, one of the most cratered objects in the solar system. Titan, in true color, I've already introduced that one. A couple of the moons of Saturn, Rhea, Tethys, and Dione, pretty much balls of ice. Enceladus is another one of our largest, with Europa, one of the largest, or best chances of finding life. It's got a huge subsurface ocean. We've got these huge cracks which blow out water, almost like volcanoes. It is volcanoes of water mists. We've flown Cassini through those to study, and we found pretty much waters and salts and a lot of dissociated hydrogen. Moon Iapetus, which shaped kind of like a walnut, which they're still kind of wondering about with this huge equatorial ridge right there. Maybe a collapsed ringlet. Mimas may look familiar to some folks as a particular Star Wars object. We move out to the moons of Uranus. Right there is the highest cliff face in the solar system. You could jump off that, and with the gravity of Miranda there, take you 12 minutes to hit the bottom. You would not enjoy hitting the bottom. You could. It would take you 12 minutes. And then Triton, a moon of Neptune. And if you look up here, coined the term cantaloupe terrain. So then we go into the rings of Saturn, and if you move out to the edge of the B ring, you've got these huge pillars up there of ring material that are kicked up by the different gravitational influences of the different objects in there. And then there's map projection. You can take those round planets and stretch them out into a map. So this is the surface of Europa. And note that there's no craters there. Very young surface, does a lot of resurfacing, a lot of movement of the ice materials on there, and that's what makes it a very interesting object for study. So we bring out the other works that I've been able to do. I started pretty recently with some of the data from Hubble. So bringing out data. None of these are exactly that. Kind of close to true color if you stare at the Orion Nebula for 9 hours. That's the Horsehead Nebula in infrared. All right. And then, it doesn't all have to be direct photographs. We can take, in this case, Mars, data from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. You do multiple passes, use a parallax method from the photography, and derive altimetry from that. We can take this satellite imagery, bring it into a computer graphics application, and render it as if you were standing on the planet itself. You know, this is from data taken from orbit, so that's where they're able to take two satellite images, come up with the altimetry data. Then I can look at a thin, narrow strip of color, get kind of an idea of what the color is down there. Bring it into Maya, and then render it out to something pretty. So that's Pecha-kucha crater on Mars. With a little bit of artistic license on the color, that's more or less how you'd see it if you were standing there on the southern rim. So, at this point, you can steal my software. I've open sourced these. The only one I haven't done yet is the Juno Camera stuff, just because I'm not happy with it yet. But basically, that's to encourage other folks to get into planetary image processing, because it's fun. It's real. I feel like puzzles. It's like I'm doing a puzzle, because you piece them all together and whatnot. You come up with a really pretty picture. So, and there's another tool for debayering raw MSL mass cam data. So that is. Yeah.